All right, folks, thanks for coming back. Um, I want to throw out a couple of thoughts first before we get into, kind of the first step. Think of this as kind of like a preface of a book. Um, so, you know, this is basically right here the cliff notes of everything that I'm going to talk about. Okay, it's these three items here. You want to build something that people want to use. And really, you want to build something that people want to use and that somebody wants to pay for. Now, your business models, can be flexible. Um, don't just automatically think that, hey, we're going to be able to plug ads in around everything, because that can lead you down a bad path. Also, other things, don't think that you're necessarily going to be able to go and mine any kind of data and sell access that way. It's not that you can't. It's I think of the sizzle on the steak. You still got to have the steak. I view ads and mining data as kind of that sizzle. That's something that will augment what you're doing, but you still want to go and be able to, sell access some way. Now, there are a couple of business models along those lines. If you're Google and you can be, the biggest guy in that market segment, then maybe advertisement does work for you. What do I mean by that? Think about all the people who pay for Google. Now you're probably sitting here thinking, I don't pay for Google. Well, I actually do. Um, in that I do run some advertisements out there on Google. Facebook, kind of the same way. Okay, you're selling people, you're giving them access to your users. Well, if you are the big guy in that market segment, you can actually go make that work. Okay, but you're a startup right now. Boy, I tell you, that's a hard thing to go sell an investor on, or make a lot of money from when you're small, in saying, I'm going to have ads around it and it's just all going to work. Because you do look at, there are a lot of companies like news organizations started out that way and they couldn't make it work. So, anyway, the point is, build something that people want to use and somehow somebody's going to pay for. Okay. You also want to have co founders that get along. I tell you, you get married, you can get a divorce, you can go your separate ways. You got a co-founder who, you're not getting along with, there's a lot of bad things that can happen there. And typically, the co-founder who should be pushed out, you don't really have you. So let's assume for a second that you've been smart enough to put your organization into papers, and you've got, an LLC or an incorporation or something like that that says, okay, everybody gets this percentage. John gets 30% and Jim's at 25 and somebody else is at 15 and I've got some investors and they've got some piece and all that. Okay, that's great. Nobody really thinks about how to get rid of them. Okay. And under what mechanisms can you get rid of them? And the reason why I bring that up is I've been in some startups, and I tell you, the jilted co-founder, man, they are the most hateful people in the world, and they don't want to get along with anybody. And things I would recommend is that they could be, their share in that could be bought off. And you can state what what amount of money buys them off, in the sense of, okay, you could get it potentially at the last funding round. You could get them, if you're pre-funding, you could get them for, a very nominal amount of money. Okay. Now you got to have some kind of kicker in there. You got to have some reason for them to go quietly. You can't say, well, you have to give your shares back for zero. That's not going to work. But you give them back something for the work that they've done. Okay. And, you also say that they've got to be quiet. They can't run around and be hateful and, spew hatred, because that that happens as well. It's an amazing scene to see that sometimes people will literally say, if the startup isn't going to be successful with me, I want it to fail. It's an amazing thing. It happens all the time. It is an amazing thing that happens all the time. People would rather the startup fail without them than, or I'm sorry, yeah, they'd rather fail without them and they force that failure rather than they fail on their ideas. They don't want success outside of them. It's just an amazing thing, and I'm seeing that right now on one of the startups that I've invested in. And it's like I can't really do anything. So also remember, when somebody says 99% of startups, you as a founder are going to think, oh, that 1%, I'm in that 1%. No. 99% means 99%. Guess what? You're in the 99% too. Okay? So understand the general rules. You're in the general rules. Okay? Also, there are great entrepreneurs out there that I want to mention, and they're not just, the guys who've come lately. They're not app guys, and they're not, LinkedIn or Facebook or Google or Tesla or whatever. Entrepreneurship a long time ago. And I want to call some of them out because they were great entrepreneurs. They could see around corners. They could see where things were going in the future. Cornelius Vanderbilt. Okay, you may or may not have heard of him. He owned a lot of ships that sailed in and out of New York in the mid 1800s, and he looked at this thing called railroads and said, "Oh my God, railroads are going to be where it's at. That's how we're going to move." Quantities of people and materials from one location to another. So he sold all his ships and got into the railroad business. If that's not seeing where the future is, I don't know what is. John D. Rockefeller, he was the first of the great titans of industry. Okay, he started Standard Oil. You may or may not know Standard Oil. Okay, what was Standard Oil famous for? It wasn't gasoline, folks. Now, Rockefeller was actually an accountant who worked in somebody's refinery and said, refining is really the bottleneck of oil, and I need to be in control of this. So he basically took over refining. And, anybody can go out and drill a hole in the ground and get some oil. Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, that Midwestern area, they got a lot of oil up in there. Nobody knows about it now, but there's a lot of oil there. So Cleveland was a big place for oil refining. Okay, so he started Standard Oil. He bought up one refinery. He bought up another. He ends up buying up basically every refinery in and around Cleveland. What is he famous for there? And that is kerosene oil. Okay, you may not realize this, but 150 years ago, 160, 170 years ago, you had oil powered lamps. There was no electricity. Okay, so that oil had to come from somewhere, and that came from Standard Oil. What Standard Oil did is they created, a highly refined kerosene product that went into these oil lamps. And that kerosene product didn't have problems. It didn't tend to explode. It didn't tend to cause other problems, whereas other versions of kerosene did have problems. So they created a highly refined kerosene, and it worked out really well. And so, that was a great product that customers wanted. There's a reason why they got to 90% plus control of the oil refining marketplace, and that's because their products were simply better. Yes, there were a lot of bad things that they did, but also their products were better. As electricity became a thing and cars became a thing, boy, the refineries, they could create gasoline too. So when Henry Ford needed a fuel for his engine, he turned to Standard Oil and gasoline. Okay. And Henry Ford's also a great entrepreneur because Henry Ford said, there's this thing called alum, and they own the patents for automobiles. Well, I'm going to thumb my nose at that because they're overly broad. There's a lot of problems with them. And, I came up with these things on my own. And guess what? After alum sued him, he actually won. So, there is a certain going against the establishment in him. Billy Durante. Billy Durante was the actual person who put together General Motors. A lot of people think of Howard Sloan with General Motors, and there's a lot of good reasons to think of Sloan with General Motors, but Billy Durante is the actual guy who put together General Motors because he saw that people would want, some commonality across their products. I shouldn't say commonality, but they would want different features across a main set of products. And so he is the guy who put together General Motors, Buick, Chevrolet, I don't think it was Pontiac at the time, but that was the guy who started up. The problem with him is he has the same problem that a lot of other entrepreneurs have, is that they're a little bit wild. He actually got chased out of General Motors twice, not once. And it was the second time that was really, really painful inside the Great Depression. And he was replaced with Alfred Sloan. And Sloan had a set of rules that he operated under that made General Motors successful. You may have heard of the Sloan School of Management. I believe it's at MIT, and a lot of the Sloan management principles. So that comes from, obviously, Alfred Sloan. And the reason why I have the two of them, Durante and Sloan, is, entrepreneurship requires a certain amount of wildness, a certain amount of seeing where things are going. Okay. But it also requires a certain bit of management style and expertise to be able to implement processes and procedures that can allow your company to be successful. So Durante is kind of a stage one entrepreneur. Think of Sloan as kind of the stage two. And the point is, you want to be able to transition from the guy with the wild idea to the guy who can generate income and growth for your company. Okay. Obviously others, Bill Gates. Gates was there at the beginning of the start of Microsoft. He was there, took an active role for 25 plus years, and eventually, stepped away. Obviously you have guys like Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg. I think Musk and Zuckerberg are going to be working at their various companies probably until the day they die, because they both just seem to be that driven. I think Bezos has kind of stepped back from Amazon, and he's more taking an interest in his own personal life. But anyway, the point being, you have great entrepreneurs who are out there. It's not just software. There's lots of other entrepreneurial positions out there. These can be everything from an individual to somebody who they've got a, 50 gas stations and quickie marts, and they've got 5 hotels that they own, or they've got XYZ. There's lots of entrepreneurs out there, lots of different things that you can do. So be flexible as you think about things and look at things that are out there in the marketplace. All right, so that's it for, I guess, step 2 here.